You are on assignment.
We'll keep increasing sanctions.
I like people coming early.
Now, a behind-the-scenes look. Hey everyone, welcome to On Assignment. I'm Alex Villarreal.
And I'm Imran Siddiqui. Our first story this week, what do Somalis want to see in a draft constitution?
Organic farming is on the rise. We'll talk with our agriculture reporter.
What's a Sharia loan and how does it work? We'll find out.
And you'll meet a little-known ape that's one of our closest relatives in the animal kingdom.
We'll get a behind-the-scenes look at these stories and more, so join us as we take you on assignment. A new survey that is a joint effort between VOA and Google offers a rare look at the political views of people in Somalia.
Thousands of Somalis responded to this unprecedented survey about a draft constitution for their nation. Harun Maruf of VOA's Somali service and reporter Mary Alice Salinas tell us about the rough road ahead for a constitution for Somalia. I'm here with Harun Maruf, senior editor for VOA's Somali service. Harun, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
We're talking to you about this survey that the Somali service did of Somalis about their opinions on the draft constitution.
So VOA Somali service took on an unprecedented task when it agreed to work with Google on a survey about Somalia's draft constitution. The service's reach into Somalia is broad and deep, with listenership of more than 70% in much of the country. VOA compiled more than 20,000 phone numbers from around Somalia, including breakaway Somaliland and semi-autonomous Puntland.
What were some of the most significant findings to come out of this?
Most Somalis want Sharia to be the base of their country. They want Sharia to be applied when in criminal cases and in civic cases.
More than 3,000 men and women responded to the survey. More than three-quarters said they support the draft constitution. 86% said the constitution should be based on Islamic law, or Sharia, while 68% agreed slightly or strongly that women should be allowed to hold a political post. The vast majority of respondents, 83%, said they support a strong central government for the fractured country.
The constitution is endorsing the federal system, and the federal system is allowing states to have more powers. So they are worried about what would the country look like if more powers is given to the regional states. They have a fear that the country could disintegrate.
This aspect of the support for Sharia law, was this surprising?
Because of the political difficulties and the long-standing civil war, many people have sought refuge and sanctuary in mosques. People, because they suffered, they were looking to reason why they are suffering. So many people became very religious.
Of course, it's a difficult undertaking because Somalia is a very challenging environment for journalists and really everyone who's there. So what kinds of challenges did you face and how did you work around those?
Large segments of the country is under the control of the Al-Shabaab militant group, and Al-Shabaab has been on the record discouraging people vigorously not to participate in the process to draft this constitution and not to have their say, because they don't believe in constitution, they believe in strict interpretation of the Quran and the Hadith. Of course, the constitution is based on Sharia. It says anything that contradicts Islam is null and void. That's what the constitution says. But Al-Shabaab is not listening to that. It rejected and it actively campaigned against the constitution, and it has also announced that anybody who participates will be targeted, and they have been making death threats against people who participate in the constitution process.
What would you say was the biggest benefit to come out of this, the widest impact?
The impact is that the discussion is going on about the constitution. It's very important that people have discussion about things that affect their lives directly. And what was very interesting to see is that although the country has been divided politically according to clan ideologies for a long time. Ordinary people have shared similar ideas and similar ideologies when it comes to how the country is going to be ruled, what kind of government they're going to have, and their future.
We're going to take a little break now. When we come back, a look at a challenge for modern farming.
How do farmers combine organic farming with more productive, older methods? We'll find out more when we return. This is On Assignment.
The agency supports the country's election commission as
great criticism, anti-gay measures having...
Coming in first thing in the morning, I get down to my desk, get into my computer and just check all the stories we have.
I will come to work in the morning and of course hit the ground running.
Yes, sad story.
That part of the morning is really crazy for me, but that's how it is. I've gotten used to it.
He spares no details of the horror.
I'm so self-conscious.
When we come in, we want to make sure the table looks shiny.
Oh, somebody was having a party on this table.
Dimi and I, we have a chemistry and we work together very well.
Vincent is just an easygoing guy, and sometimes I like to kind of pull his coattails a little bit and just try to shake him up.
Hello, I'm Vincent McCory.
And I'm Dimiake Mokaliele. This is In Focus.
Every time I get on the set, when I hear that you're on, hard as it might be to believe, I am a nervous wreck inside, because I always feel it's just a question of the prompter stopping and me not finding my words on the page and what will happen.
The world's most dangerous conflict. VOA's Chris Simpkins has. I think the best part is just knowing that you have an audience out there that is expecting you to tell them these stories, being able to relate to them these stories in a way that makes them feel informed. Kumaraswamy's legal action against rebel leaders.
Demi and Vincent enjoy each other. It's a very warm friendship.
They're joking. They have this great rapport. This is In Focus. This is In Focus.
He's half the face, I am half the face of the show.
The two of us together make it feel like the show is whole.
Welcome back to On Assignment, coming to you from Washington. Demand is growing around the world for organic food, produced without artificial fertilizers or pesticides. But a recent study casts doubt on whether a growing world can be fed if farmers do not use these chemicals.
On Assignment's Doug Bernard checked in with agriculture reporter Steve Baragona for the background on this story. Let's take a look at it.
Steve Baragona, your feature takes a look at some of the costs and the benefits of organic agriculture as compared to traditional agriculture. Help us frame this debate if you can. What are the key issues at stake?
Yeah, for more than half a century now, we've been growing our food using large amounts of fertilizers, pesticides, and irrigation water. And this has done tremendous things in terms of improving our food productivity. But it's come at a cost.
Well, let's take a look at what those experts have to say in your feature.
In rural Maryland, an hour-and-a-half drive from Washington, Bill Mason is tilling his fields to plant organic maize and soybeans. About 2/3 of his 340 hectares are organic, but not all of them. Mason sits right in the middle of a long-running debate over how best to feed the world. Critics of conventional farming say excessive fertilizer use pollutes waterways, kills fish, and contributes to climate change. Customers will pay a premium for food produced without pesticides and fertilizers. But Mason says his organic crops typically do not produce as much.
We are finding that our corn yields are about 3/4 of the yield of a normal conventional crops.
With those lower yields, feeding the world organically would require clearing more land for farms, says Columbia University soil scientist Pedro Sanchez.
We'll have to get more land into cultivation to do it that way, with horrible, negative ecological consequences.
Experts say deforestation to make way for agriculture is already contributing to climate change and a loss of biodiversity. And farmers will have 9 billion mouths to feed by mid-century, which puts agriculture in a difficult position, says U.S. Department of Agriculture researcher Michelle Cavagelli.
Right now, we can't feed 9 billion people with the ways we're farming, whether it's conventional or organic.
So experts are working on both sides of the equation. Cavagelli is working to improve the productivity of organic farms using natural fertilizers like chicken manure. The trouble, he says, is that often it does not provide enough nutrients.
We need to improve all systems, and so what's the best way to do that? Both to feed the world's population, but also to do it in a way where we're not destroying the planet.
Many of the African farmers Pedro Sanchez has worked with have used synthetic fertilizers to triple their yields, making a huge difference in their food security.
But as a scientist, I don't like that as the solution, and I will not preach it as the solution. I want to integrate that with organically produced nutrients.
Organic nutrients, such as fertilizing cover crops, have worked out for Bill Mason. He says his conventional farming neighbors are taking notice.
But I think there's ideas that we're using that are carrying over to the conventional world.
So many experts say feeding a world of 9 billion will not be a choice between organic or conventional farming. They say it will take a blend of both. Steve Baragona, VOA News, Ruthsburg, Maryland.
So Steve, very interesting report. Give us your sense as to how you think organic agriculture is really going to integrate with the more traditional forms that we see spread all over the world.
Yeah, there is this growing market for organic products because people are willing to pay a premium for products that are raised without these fertilizers, pesticides. So there's always going to be a place for this kind of agriculture. But it seems inescapable that the conventional forms are just more productive, and with a growing population, we need that food. But there is this kind of this joining together where farmers, conventional farmers, are using more cover crops that fertilize their soil basically for free. And they're using conservation agriculture, that where you leave the residues on your fields, and that holds in the water and also enriches the organic matter in the soil. So there is this kind of joining together where it's not just either organic or conventional. There are techniques from both that are useful in either circumstance.
Well, Steve Baragona, VOA's food and agriculture correspondent, great beat and a great report. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You can see more of Steve Baragona's reports on agriculture at our website, voanews.com.
We're taking another break now. On the other side, a look at a new kind of loan that's catching on with Muslim Americans. You're watching On Assignment.
This is the Voice of America. Take a picture for it was extended.
VOA Special English, a way to learn American English and much more. Broadcasting news and features around the world on radio, television, and on the web at voaspecialenglish.com. For 50 years, helping people understand world events and the language and culture of America.
The Voice of America is offering online English lessons. The Classroom is Voice of America's new online English classroom. From the VOA homepage, click on Learning English and then click on the Classroom to start learning English. In the Classroom, you will find current news articles with customized English language lessons, English language activities for beginning, intermediate, and advanced English speakers, interactive workbooks and dictionaries under the Interactive Learning tab, and English programs showing you how English is really spoken, and English lessons available for teachers all over the world to use in their classrooms. Learn English with Voice of America. Click on the Classroom to start learning English today.
Homeownership is a big part of the American dream, but for some American Muslims, getting a conventional mortgage loan might not be an option because in Islam, interest payments are considered a sin.
But an increasingly popular kind of loan The Sharia loan is making homeownership compatible with their beliefs. Reporter Rabiee of VOA's Persian News Network has covered this story and talked about it with On Assignment's Philip Alexio. Mona's story starts with a look at an older home buyer from Afghanistan.
Nabi Sahak bought this house in Virginia in 2010 for his mother Khadija, a practicing Muslim from Afghanistan. He always wanted to buy a home for his parents, but avoided the purchase for many years. That's because paying interest on money, as in a conventional mortgage loan, is not allowed in strict Islamic practice.
Everybody in our family was, in one way or another, against the idea of conventional mortgages.
How did you find this family?
Well, when I decided to do the piece, I reached out to a few of the larger, more well-known Islamic banking companies in the U.S. And there was one based in Michigan that services even Muslim Americans, Muslim Canadians in Canada, and they referred me to a nearby family in Virginia.
How did they end up finding this sort of Sharia-compliant loan?
Well, their story is really interesting because they're Afghanis, and they came to the U.S. in 2002 after spending some time, they said, in Afghan refugee camps in Pakistan after leaving Afghanistan. And they had actually, the young son, for his wife and his child, had already bought a home using conventional mortgages here in the States for themselves. But when it came time for him and his brother to buy a home for mom and dad, that older generation insisted on living in a house that was sort of interest-free. And that's when the son, Nabi, went researching to see if that option was even available to him in the U.S.
Now, there are 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. There's a big market to tap into. Companies like Guidance, are they expanding? Is the demand growing?
Guidance Residential tells me that they've had almost 5% increases in business over the last 3 years.
For the majority, it's a relief to know that this actually does exist. We are, in a sense, impacting the home ownership rates of Muslim Americans in a positive way.
Alhamdulillah, how are you doing?
Including even through the recession of the last few years and the mortgage crisis, they say, didn't really affect them. They feel like they're really tapping into an untapped niche market and there's room for growth. But I don't think the industry has really taken hold in the US the way Sharia-compliant mortgages have taken hold in countries like the UK. And they tell me sort of anecdotally, and that's just sort of the market is larger. The Muslims who have come to the UK tend to be a little bit more traditional or closer tied to their culture than, let's say, the Muslim Americans who have merged in and blended with the larger culture a bit better and don't insist on having Sharia-compliant mortgages.
It's that the bank and the buyer purchase it together?
The buyer chooses the house, the Islamic bank buys that house, then immediately sells it to the buyer at a markup. Then you, the buyer, would make installment plans, but they don't call that interest because it's a transaction of an actual commodity. It's not interest on money. And that's what's sort of forbidden in Islamic tenets against this sort of stuff. Another option quickly would be the bank buys the home, then rents it to you, the buyer, in a rent-to-own type agreement. And the third most popular model, they tell me, in the US is a partnership agreement where both the bank and the buyer become co-owners of that house, and then you, the buyer, sort of buy my share of the house back over a certain amount of time.
We are very comfortable here. We are at peace. Everywhere we go, we tell people we got an Islamic loan and are very happy.
So who determines if these loans are Sharia compliant?
Every company sort of goes to the customer and says, here are the actual Muslim scholars that we've gone to put their stamp of approval on our products. Guidance told me that they spent several years and probably $2, even maybe $3 million, a really huge number, researching and then paying for the consultation involved to set up those financial transaction contracts when they were first setting up 10 years ago.
Do they get advantages, tax write-off advantages built in?
They do, but apparently they didn't always. Guidance sets up an LLC, a limited liability company. That's too technical, I suppose, to get into. But that sort of protects the home buyer from certain taxes, some sort of a homestead tax or a business tax. Others tell me that anecdotally again, and I didn't confirm the details of this, several years ago, and so relatively recently, some federal and state laws came into place allowing buyers of this kind of a financial transaction to take advantage of the tax write-offs. Okay. But they seem to be more limited to the sort of blanket tax write-off that you and I might enjoy in a conventional loan.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Rabiee. Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
This is On Assignment coming to you from Studio 55 at VOA's World Headquarters in Washington. You've probably never heard of them, but bonobos look like small chimpanzees. And like many primates, they are an endangered species.
VOA's Julie Taboh told me more about these often overlooked animals. Let's take a look.
When I first heard the word bonobo, I thought it was some kind of dessert, like a Napoleon. And I first found out about it when someone handed me a book called Bonobo Handshake. And I thought they were very interesting. I thought there was some kind of a chimpanzee. And then I met Irene, who is this great filmmaker, who did a documentary about bonobos. And the more I learned about bonobos in talking with her, the more fascinated I got.
They're extremely underrepresented, and it's because most people just know of chimpanzees. You don't learn about bonobos in schools or, in books. It's just not there.
So tell us more about this bonobo handshake and the nickname of hippie chimp.
Yes, well, the bonobos are very peace-loving, and a lot of the ways that they resolve conflict is through sex. They like sex, they do it a lot with each other, they're actually bisexual, and that's how they reach out to each other and form their societies and try to just, at any cost, resolve conflict in that way. They have recently discovered that bonobos are, along with the chimpanzee, our closest living relative. They share almost 99% of our DNA.
And that is something close.
Very close. And this has been, for people in the field, it's not a huge surprise. But now that they've mapped their genome, they are our closest living relative along with a chimpanzee. And this just is phenomenal information in terms of learning more about ourselves.
But bonobos are an endangered species. What are some of these threats that they're facing?
Yes, in fact, they were the last apes to be discovered, but they are probably going to be the first ape to be extinct.
The biggest threat to bonobos is by far the bushmeat trade. People are hunting bonobos. They're killing these animals and they're taking them back to market to sell them.
Leading scientists estimate there may be as few as 7,000 bonobos left in the wild, all in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But working with the government and local community, the Bonobo Conservation Initiative has set up 2 protected nature reserves, including one larger than Belgium. And then there is Lola Ya Bonobo, the only bonobo sanctuary in the world, located just outside of Kinshasa. Orphaned bonobos are nursed back to health here and, if possible, released back into the wild. From our point of view, we look and say, well, why are they killing them? These are peaceful, beautiful creatures. From the perspective of people who hunt them down, they have no other way of making a living. So in addressing the bonobo concern and their highly endangered status, we also have to think, what alternatives can we give to people for that?
So what needs to be done in terms of conservation?
First of all, we need to recognize that they're a highly endangered species, and their habitat is in the rainforest of the Congo, which is the second largest rainforest in the world after the Amazon. And so that's important to preserve the rainforest for our own sakes. We also have them, there's many people, like Sally Cox, who is head of the Bonobo Conservation Initiative, who've set up these reserves. Her organization has 2 reserves, and I think it's last count she was saying is something like 35,000 square kilometers. So these have been put aside, and they have the support of the government to help the bonobos. And a key element to that too, Alex, is that you have to talk with the local community, educate them, get them involved. We can't go there and say, these are important creatures, we need to come in and save them. You have to work with the villagers. You have to give them alternative means of support so they don't go hunting them, and sort of give them an appreciation and understanding what special creatures they are in their own backyard.
Bonobos, huh? Interesting. What was the most unique thing that you discovered while talking to Julie?
Well, I think the first thing is that, these animals, these bonobos, are a creature that a lot of people haven't heard of. You say bonobos to someone and they look at you with a blank stare. They're like,
what is that?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Julie told me that a lot of people think that maybe it's some kind of a dessert or something when they first hear it. But these creatures are really fascinating, and they share 99% of our DNA, like chimpanzees. So a lot, I guess, that we can learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, well, let's get on to our next story. In the U.S., hip-hop music and rap are traditionally dominated by African Americans and Latinos, but one Iranian-American rapper is trying to break that stereotype.
This week's full-feature story comes to us from Los Angeles and reporter Elizabeth Lee. Let's check it out.
Look. He is not a traditional rapper. He He is 24 years old, holds a degree in political science, did not grow up in a rough urban neighborhood, and is Iranian-American. On stage, he calls himself Azad Right.
Being on stage is the best part about this. Being able to see these kids and these people's reactions to your music, the stuff you spent like, you know, a year making. And you see people like, wow, like this is really, really good and I can relate to this. That's what makes me like tingle.
I don't get tongue-tied anymore.
His real name is Azad Nafisi. He's the son of Majid Nafisi, a famous Iranian poet and political exile. Growing up, Azad went to his father's poetry readings around the world. He says his father has been a big influence.
Being able to see the reaction that people gave him, like that's one of the reasons I always wanted to go on stage and like express my feelings.
Can't maintain a relationship.
But expressing himself through rap as an Iranian-American has its challenges.
You know, I've seen a lot of comments on the YouTube videos and on the blog posts like, yo, this kid, like when I first saw him, you know, his image on the site, I didn't expect him to rap.
In the US, hip-hop and rap are mostly dominated by African Americans and Latinos. Right is trying to break the stereotypes.
That's my goal. You know, I don't think that there should be any culture, any heritage that doesn't have a representative in that industry.
Helping him overcome cultural boundaries are former classmates and now producers Omid Adami and Jonathan Marquez.
I don't think the world has ever seen anything like us. Iranian-American rapper, Iranian-American producer, Puerto Rican, Guatemalan producer.
The name Azad Right symbolizes what's possible. Right's parents named him Azad, which means freedom in Farsi.
And it's something my parents didn't have.
Azad says he's trying to free the music industry of cultural bias. As to Right,
I always liked to write, you know, and I didn't like the way W-R-I-T-E looked. And like one day we were just sitting, you know, and we were like, yo, like, just switch it to R-I-G-H-T, your music's positive and it looks better.
His dream is to succeed at what he loves most, writing
serve a purpose.
and performing his words on stage.
Let my light shine, I know it's the right time.
Elizabeth Lee for VOA News, Los Angeles.
Well, that does it for this week's episode of On Assignment.
It's a wrap for us this week, but next week we're going to Cairo for a look at someone training hard to represent Egypt at the upcoming Games. Of course, those games that we're talking about are the Olympics, which begin on Friday, July 27th with the closing ceremonies on Sunday, August 12th.
And of course, you can catch all of our episodes at voanews.com or on Facebook. On behalf of all of us at On Assignment, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.